We all have power to help transform someone else's life. Every day, some people do. We all have power to transform someone else's life, and every day, some people do. This quote came from a little series that I've been watching. It's from a university in the USA called Notre Dame, and they have, in the last decade, been doing a study on generosity. And the study on generosity is run by a guy called Christian Smith. Doesn't that sound like a fake name, Christian Smith? But he's an amazing professor, and he with a whole team of people got budgeted $5 million to do a study internationally, a global study on generosity. Who would want that job? Wouldn't that be fun? I just thought, oh, wow. So I was super intrigued. And they were looking at whether generosity, the power of generosity, the gift of time, the gift of money, the gift of helping hands, of mowing lawns, whatever it is, who transforms lives through the power of generosity. And so this study is going on and is continuing on. And while millions of people are struggling with putting food on the table, and others struggling to get jobs, others struggling to have a wage in the world that actually will be able to allow them to have food on the table, there's a group that's studying the power of generosity. Why do some people give so much, and why do some people give so little? What's that about? And so as we enter into our little experiment of the power of generosity as a church, we're just again going to be dipping into some of this group's studies as well as Jesus's words and see what God has for us today. It's so fun. The actual university has a whole initiative. It's called the Science of Generosity. Isn't it just sounding so intriguing? So today I've kind of pinched one of their little phrases that no one is left out of generosity. Why are we so generous to each other? What if we took the posture of experimenting with generosity even further than what we know? So some of you might already be sitting here saying, because I know this is true. Some of you might be sitting here, yeah, I've been at a church before, or I've been in this church before, where you're listening to a talk, or you're listening or involved in something that is not relating to you. So have you ever had that experience where you might be sitting there saying, this message is for someone else? This is really good for that person sitting over there. Have you ever been in a place, though, where the talk's literally not relating to you at all? Perhaps there's a talk on marriage and you're single. Perhaps there's been a talk on parenting and you don't have kids. Perhaps there's a talk on something that's not related to you. I'm glad to tell you today, I can guarantee this talk will be related to you. I can personally guarantee that it will also help you. Now, what you might also be connecting the dot with, but the thing that she's about to talk about is money, right? Pastor, microphone, money. I'm nervous. I think I need to go to the toilet and then keep going, right? That's very often how we feel. So if you're sitting here visiting this morning, I just want to make it as clear as I can. If you're here dipping your toe into the water of what is this church here, I want to just say, could you give us a little bit of grace? We're having a little bit of a conversation around a meal table, and you are welcome, and we're really happy that you are here this morning. Every year, we try and carve out a little bit of time to talk about this kind of stuff, to look at how to honour God with our finances and with our stuff. And so we are starting that series, and we're starting to just to look at what is the growth that God's calling us to as individuals and also as a church. So first point, I'm not teaching this because we're wanting to fundraise, all right? That is not the reason that we're looking at that today. We have, though, a wonderful finance team who met this week, and we have a wonderful finance team who will tell you some stuff about how we're going with our finances. That's going to be happening at the end of November. But what I want to say today, that we are really grateful for this community who is so generous, has such a generous heart in giving financially as well as contributing in all sorts of ways. This is a generous church. We're not here to fundraise. This is to have a primary motivation as my role as a pastor, as someone that is helping to shepherd us towards growth in our discipleship. We're looking at, as a role, we need also to see, what does Jesus say as part of our discipleship about money? What does Jesus say about generosity? And also, as a collective discipleship, we're going to be looking at that together as the family of God. And this will be just done like a conversation around a meal table. We're coming from the place of discipleship and apprenticeship to Jesus. So first question, is there a light annoying you all? You're all looking up like there's something. Shannon, is there anything we can do about that? Because everyone's thinking there's a disco or something. Thank you. Shannon's first day on Sunday operations. Yeah. Can I just say he's had a lot to juggle this week as we got in here, and he's doing a great job. So well done, Shannon. Can you deal with the lights? It was like, are there angels in the room? You're all looking up, and I'm like, hello. Very funny. So, has anyone ever stressed about money? Anyone had ever pressure about money? Anyone? Yeah. I think that you're almost always going to say there's always something more that we want, isn't there? There's always something more being told to us that we are wanting more and desiring more stuff. Advertisements are just drawing us in always with that. In fact, I was walking through Churnside Park Shopping Centre this week, and there's a whole new booth. This is a new one. I hadn't seen this before. The booth was cash for gold. So gold, the currency of gold is now like, step on up with your gold. Let's trade it in for your cash. Who's seen that before? We're just in a whole different place where we are swimming in a culture that talks a lot about money. But fortunately, Jesus also talked a lot about money. As we start to have the joy of helping people read the Bible and scriptures for the first time, I don't know if you've been in that place where they're reading it, and people that are new to the words of Jesus are like, he talks a lot about money. And they're also shocked often and surprised that he also is kind of rough on the people that are the religious leaders of the day. People are shocked about that. And often people are also shocked that the Bible is a story. It's not just a list of things to do. I don't know if you've noticed that with people that are new to the life of Jesus. And all that reveals that money does come from an outflow of our heart, doesn't it? And we have very clear indicators by our calendar and by our budgets about how you handle money. If we looked at your budget and your calendar, we'd be able to tell a lot about you, what you value, what you prioritise. So, is there anyone here rich? Interesting. Anyone rich? Yeah, interesting. Okay, that's the end of the message. You all know you're rich. That's great. You know, when we ask that question, often people are like, oh, if I won the lottery, I'd be rich. If I had an inheritance, I'd be rich. But a lot of you already raised your hands going, no, I'm rich right now. And we know that, don't we? Living in this country, we know we are in the lucky country. And in fact, this country is in the top 5 of median wealth for an adult globally. We are rich, and we are living in a place that is rich, that is full of abundant, plentiful qualities, that also amazing people. And we know that's nothing to do with money. We are rich because of what God has done in our nation. So that means that if you're in this room right now, you are also rich. Congratulations. you're rich. Who feels rich? You are rich. Who feels rich? Different question, right? There's a big difference between being rich and feeling rich. And we know every income bracket that people have, right? Each person believes if I could just get into the next income bracket, whatever it is, that amount of money is going to satisfy our needs, right? And we know that we're imagining that something next is going to help us satisfy our needs. I know you're sitting there going, no, that's not right, but it's true. That's the way we think. We imagine there's going to be another day in the future when we're going to feel more rich. And I just want to say the key as we start this series today about generosity and feeling rich and knowing that you are rich is to the degree that you have margin in your life and the degree to which you actually respond in generosity, to that degree is how you will feel content with what you currently have. Can you remember the time you felt most rich? I can. I can remember when I was 15, my very first job, I was working in a deli and I got my first pay packet. In those days, it was a little envelope full of cash. It was when I felt the most rich. Can you think of a time when you felt most rich? That packet of joy hopped on the bike with me and we went straight from receiving it to the sports store where I'd been eyeing off a softball glove. And I bought my own softball glove. I was a keeper. I was really good. Couldn't get past me. But I wanted my own glove. I didn't want to, use the gnarly ones that you had to share with other people. Yeah. I had my own glove. I felt so rich at 15. It was my first purchase with my own money, and my own glove now was part of my story. I felt rich. Can you honestly think of a time when you felt rich? I think that feeling, that probably was the first moment, and I sometimes kind of think that might have been the richest I've ever been, because I just knew I'd been given something through working hard, and I was then able to own that for myself. The difference between being rich and feeling rich is, do you have any margin? Are you content? And are you able to be generous? Let's have a look at Luke 6. The words of Jesus are going to help us through this. So this is from a chapter where Jesus has just called all his apprentices, his disciples together, and they are hearing him talk about people who are blessed. And so this chapter leading up to these verses here, he's saying, blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. He's also saying, blessed are those who hunger now, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are those who weep now, for you will laugh. And how great is your reward in heaven? That's how he starts with the Sermon on the Mount. And then he starts talking about enemies and how in Luke 6 he starts to say that the way of Jesus is to love your enemies and be merciful towards them, lending to them, give to your enemies. And then he hits the disciples and us with this verse. Give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. The measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now remember, this is a pastor with a microphone speaking to you to empower and equip you. To say that a life following Jesus, this is it. Your measure is going to be this: how you give, how you grow in all different ways, how you experience the grace of God, that is going to be measured and returned to you. As you know his love in every area of your life, my job is here to create different contexts as a local church where we, through our lives together, grow, express that love that we've received and that life that we've received to a watching world. So let's look at the next verse here, where if we look in the New Testament about growing in the grace of giving, Paul is very clear as he's talking to a group of believers. He says, but since you excel in everything, have a listen to these people. They excel in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love that we have kindled in you. What an amazing group of people. And then Paul says, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. See that above all those things, you might be amazing at prayer. You might be going to every Wednesday night prayer group. But Paul's saying to this group of believers and us, excel in the grace of giving. Your spiritual maturity involves the grace, growing in the grace of giving. And no one is left out. It's for all of us. No matter where we're at, we can grow in the grace of giving. So I promised you a guarantee. We're going to go through right now really quickly, four groups, and I can guarantee that you'll be in one of these groups. All right? So what I want you to do as we move through these, I want you to listen to the category that you're in. All right? And as I talk about you, also listen to the category that's coming after that you might be growing into. Are you ready? Now, if you're here as a visitor and you're like, I'm not following Jesus yet, that's okay. We welcome you to this conversation. This is also going to be helpful for you. If you haven't yet, street party. If you haven't yet heard the thunder, that's thunder, right? That wasn't my tummy. So, what I love to say is that if you're a follower of Jesus, this is important for you. But if you're not a follower of Jesus yet, this is something that I want to say. These are basic principles for all of us. Let's have a look at the next slide. I'm obviously often showing my preference in music. Coldplay, right? Amazing group of musicians. When they were in Melbourne, they were interviewed. And they were interviewed, that little interview there had the heading, Chris Martin, which is the guy on the right, the lead singer. Chris Martin on Coldplay donates 10% of earnings to charity every year. Coldplay, this band, which at the moment is one of the biggest groups, musical groups of earning potential around the world, give 10% to children charities, and they do that every year. So he was being interviewed, and you can follow this up this afternoon if you like. It's a funny interview because he doesn't want to talk about it. He wants that to be something that's not in the centre, which I loved. And so the interviewer said, so do you give 10% of your earnings every year to charity? And he said, well, you just told me that. And he was being really dodgy, saying, I don't want to talk about it. But then he tells this story. When he was 10 years old, his mother in England gave him £10 and then said, I want you to give £1 back to me because every time you get pocket money, you're going to tithe. And she starts to teach him about tithe at 10. And so he had this little bucket of 10% from 10 years on, and he still does that. All that to say that this is basic principles of generosity at work. And it doesn't matter yet whether you're doing that because Jesus said or because you've been trained, that this is actually how generosity works. Incredible, incredible. So that may be where you're at right now, but guess what? You don't have to be a follower of Jesus to have this basic principle work in your life. But as us who are here today worshipping Jesus, this is really important. So group one, let's have a look. Group one, really simple, those that don't give. Those that just don't give. They don't give money away, they don't give generously, and they often feel like they don't have enough. Those that don't give in this group often have this sense that they're in a strange season and they don't have enough to share with others. Often people in that just don't have a practice of giving money or have never learnt to do that. They don't do that on the streets where they see someone in need. They don't do that to non-profits. They don't do that to church. They just don't give at all. Group 1, don't give. So this study in America, excuse me, this study in America said that this group that don't give, generosity patterns they learned after all these years of studying, that 1/5 of people that follow Jesus don't give. Facts. That's what they learned globally. 1/5 of people. Now, I don't know if that's true in this room. In fact, I don't think that's true in this room, but it's interesting that that's what they studied and that's what they learned, that a group of people actually believed they were in unique circumstances where they didn't have anything that they would give. And they're not able to give away was the problem, because they had been told, they had a mentality that to be stewarding and responsible for what they had, they needed to hold on to it. Heard that before? I need to hold on to this to allow this to grow. And so they were always, this group is always imagining that there's going to be something more coming and then I'll be generous. Ever had that conversation with anyone? When I win the lottery, then I'll be generous. Guess what? That's not going to happen until that habit is established in your life. And so if only I could win $1 million, then I'll be generous. Group 1 might win $1 million, but they'll still hold it. It's an attitude of heart. It's not true that they'll change. Of course, this is very general. This is very direct. There are always exceptions. Give me grace, all right? We're doing very general. So generosity is a spiritual and also a heart issue. Group 1. The verse we're going to look at that for that is, whoever, Ecclesiastes, whoever loves money never has enough. Scripture. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to their owners except to feast their eyes upon them? Isn't that a great verse? So, people then bump into the life of Jesus, and people then, all throughout scriptures, we could have millions of examples, all of a sudden they bump into the life of Jesus and they suddenly become generous. They become generous, like Zacchaeus that Ben talked about a few weeks ago. Really small guy up in a tree gets invited by Jesus to come to his home. Remember that story? And there he is suddenly bumping into the life of generosity and love. And Zacchaeus says, I'm going to give everything and anything I own, I'm going to give and share that and give it away. A tax collector met Jesus and suddenly he's changed. When we bump into the life of God, we realize that he gave us everything. And it's out of that overflow, isn't it, that we are able then to be generous. So this thing of following Jesus, it's not a self-improvement thing. It's something that literally changes our hearts so that we want to flow out of what we've received. And that's why we're talking today about the grace of growing in our giving. Receiving the grace offered through Jesus. And the most natural overflow of that is going to be no one is left out with the generosity of God. Now, last year when we did this series at this time, we talked a lot about greed and how to kind of counter that, the power of greed in our world. And the power of greed is not going to be broken by us thinking that if we get to the next level of generosity, we're going to be able to give more. The power of greed is broken, and we'll have generosity as we discover the generosity of God. Right? Group 2. Those that give intermittently, that give randomly. Group 2. Those who see a need, see an opportunity, and so they give into that need and that opportunity. And you know these people, you've seen them, right? They might see an opportunity and so they'll dig into their pockets and they'll pull out maybe an old piece of gum. Oh, hang on. And then they'll pull out maybe a coin that's been floating around there for a long time. These are the people who will just throw in their little extra. I'm just going to give a little bit randomly. I'm just going to give something when my heart gets pulled towards it. I'm going to give something when I see a cause that I believe in. I'm going to give something when I hear a story that's important to me from another nation, perhaps. We know those people, right? We know Group 2 and how they operate. And we know Group 2 is also some people that we don't want to be too hard on. I don't want to be too hard on Group 2 because they are giving. They are responding with generosity. I don't want to be too hard on them because if they've never given at all, then this is a huge thing to change that pattern. This is a big sacrifice, and it's a brave thing to start practicing giving. So Group 2, as they start to give, they're actually doing something that is really brave. They're changing the way that they have been. And so I would just want to say today that in that study, it was fascinating that there was one person that summed it up really well. And that one person said, I give like Jesus. Jesus said, we're to give as we feel led. We're to give as we feel led. So let's just be a bit cheeky. Anyone got a verse for that? Give as you feel led. No, because it's not what Jesus said. But that's what they believe Jesus said. And it's not actually a Bible verse. There's verses about cheerfully giving, but there's not actually about give when you feel led. It's actually not true. We actually give because we're giving out of obedience. And we're giving in response to what we've received. Let's have a look at some more Corinthian wisdom from Paul. Now, about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Not random, intentional. Set aside, intentional. Set aside some money, a certain amount that's in the same amount that comes in. Set aside a certain amount, and then we will have something for when Paul arrives, is what he was saying. So we are seeing here that part of what the Corinthian church was learning was to be intentional in the way they give. Let's look at Group 3, the third group. The word tithe. Pastor, microphone, tithe. You all right? You okay? You doing all right, everyone? Third group, those that tithe. So in the Old Testament, we see very clear instructions. God is telling his people, I want you to give 10%. And we'll see that in a moment in a verse that we're going to have a look at. That 10% tithe, it really just means that out of what you have, you give 10%. And I don't know whether you've even done any accountants in the room. It's really easy. It's like you have the number and you just move the decimal point. There's your 10%. It's really easy. You don't have to be really clever. There you go. You just got something, right? That's how you do 10%. But why do we tithe? This whole big teaching is not going to be what we're talking about today. Basically, God's just instructing, give back 10% of what I've given you. Let's have a look at verse in Leviticus. A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, it all belongs to the Lord, and it's holy to the Lord. And then the very last Bible book in the Old Testament is Malachi, and we heard this last year in this similar series where Harry told a story, his personal story about this. Malachi 3. Let's read it together. Incredible words. Are you ready? Strap yourselves in. Will a mere mortal rob God? Yes, you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? In tithes and offering. You're under the curse, your whole nation, because you're robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will be not enough room to store it. Test me in this. Isn't it interesting? I don't know anywhere else in the Bible. There might be some other scholars here that can help me with this later, but I don't see anywhere else in the Bible where God says, test me. He's saying, test me in this, tithes and offerings. The scriptures often talk about offerings being over and above that, but here, God's saying, test me in this, which is why I am taking not just a holy approach to this series, but also He's inviting us to test Him, test His character. It can be an experiment of His goodness. How good is He going to be? He's asking us to test Him. Some of you might say, it's okay, tithing 10%, but it's not in my budget. I don't have that in my budget. And you're absolutely right. It's not in your budget, because God is so generous. He says, give me 10% and your budget live off 90%. That's your budget, 90% of what you've got. He's so generous, saying, give that to me and you can have 90. Pretty generous God, right? Now, I know this is controversial. I know it's not easy. And I remember as a teacher when I first went to my accountant and they just said, 10%, that's a lot of money. You sure you want to give that to the church? They didn't agree with what I was doing, but at the same time, I knew that this is the way God wants us to live. And we all have our story and we all have our experiences of that working in different ways. And I just want to tell you one story now. I want to tell you a story about when I was struggling with what do I do when I actually came to plant a church with a team and I didn't have a group of people here that were actually helping to support in the same way that I was used to with a full wage as a teacher, right? And so I came here as a team and I just knew God was doing stuff here, and there are a lot of you guys that were so generous in helping us get set up in our new homes as we arrived. This is the story that helped me at that time. It was from another pastor that was planting a church, and he had a 3-year-old daughter who he decided to have a moment with his daughter and go to McDonald's. And the pastor tells the story that he just wanted to have this moment of just enjoying this time one-on-one. And she had some French fries. He'd finished his. And so he said, can I have a French fry? And the 3-year-old grabbed her French fries and held it like this. And the pastor was sitting there telling the story and saying, who do you think you are? Because in his mind, he's got these things going on. As the 3-year-old's sitting there eating her fries and not sharing, the first thing he thought was, she doesn't realise this, and I'm sure she's not thinking this, but I bought those. The pastor's saying, I bought every part of that you're holding there. I just want one. She didn't think that. What she also wasn't thinking, but he was thinking, was, I don't actually have to ask you for the fry. I could just take it because I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and nothing could stop me from taking one of your fries. He also was thinking, and tells the story, and you know what? I own all your future fries. Every fry that you're going to have as you grow up, I own them. I own the future of your fries. You might want to give me one right now. And then he also told the story that the fourth thing is, I don't need your fry. I'll just buy my own. Isn't it interesting that often we might be having moments like that with someone that we love, and all of a sudden something rises in us, a reaction, a narrative that's actually not happening in that moment. But let's have a think about that story. This is what God's asking you to give in that story. Nothing that you have, he's saying, isn't his. Nothing that you have, he doesn't own. Nothing that you have, fries, he couldn't take it if he wanted. Nothing that you have is dependent on him giving you more in the future. And honestly, when God is asking you to be generous, He's simply asking for connection like that dad. He's looking for connection, sharing a moment. He's looking for connection because everything is from him. So the challenge for this group, group 3, the challenge is, I'm going to call it for our series, the 1% challenge. If you're in that group that it's hard for you to let go, if you're in a group, I want to give you a 1% challenge. Give 1% of what you've got coming in, your income, do it regularly, and start to see what happens until the end of the next financial year. 9 months. See what happens as you do that. See what happens as you experiment with testing God on that. Start somewhere. 4th group, last group. Group 4, this is so interesting. I can't wait to see your faces as I talk about this group. So group 4 is those where the tithe is the floor, not the ceiling. Now again, because I can't wait to see your faces, it's because I know in this room, in this church, people are really, 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 really generous. And so I'm really interested because people here are not generous because they have a lot of money. By many means, they are being generous. Really, 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 really generous. So remember, I'm not doing this talk because we're running out of money and we have to sell our sound gear. We're not doing that talk because of that. We're talking about this because it's important for us to know that we are a really generous church. It's important to know that we do give money away and give gifts away, and we do invest into ministries regularly for the sake of others, not for our sake. And so this is about discipleship. And so in group 4, you are the people in group 4 that have the ability to make a lot of money. They have the ability to make a lot of money. They've been gifted by God to generate wealth. Group 4, you might know some of them in this church and in other places, have the gift of generosity, have the grace of giving, and they are active in that. And so 1 Timothy, this is our charge to you, using 1 Timothy, where Paul says to Timothy, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Make a lot of money, group 4. Give it away. It's not counter spirituality to not make money. It's actually something, by being generous, we're growing in grace. And so my question is, for this group, what's enough for you to live on? What's the figure that God's given you to live on? And out of that, be generous. Give the rest away for the sake of others and for the sake of the kingdom. Some of you know Barry Borneman, who's going to be speaking here next week. Today, with his book, he's out at Healesville speaking to another church. When Barry brought his book to us, we knew we were doing an exchange of, I'd like to buy that book and hear about your story. Barry and Marg, their background conversation is, we just want this book to have kingdom impact. There's so much generosity through his story. Let's share it with as many people as we can. And he is. And we'll probably hear more about that next week. But generosity flows through the heart of what we've been given and sharing it. So let's just do this in summary. Group 1 and 2. Sorry, I'll put that up in a moment, Joe. Yeah, no, that's my fault. So group 1 and 2, 1% challenge for today, 1% to give faithfully. Group 3, you're in the tithing group. Is there something over and above that God's inviting you into in this series? And group 4, if you're the person that's already experiencing the grace of giving, be brave, connect to Jesus, and let's see where he takes you with generating wealth. So I got all of you? Was it relevant to some of you? All of you? Yes. All right. So today, here's why I'm starting here. I wrestled all week with, this is a pretty like strong out of the gate message to bring. Normally you'd kind of do some pastoral stuff and then bring this kind of message. Here's what happened this week that gave me courage that we are in a generosity experiment. This blew my mind. So this week I asked the elders and the finance team, hey, I've got a lunch happening this week with some friends. Don't know what it's about. Could you just pray? Kind of walking in a little bit blind. And it was with Ron and Ann Matheson, who some of you know, who have been in Uganda and have been over there as pastors with a group called Worship Harvest. They used to be here. They were part of our eldership. Brodden was on staff. But right now, they're back in Lilydale, and I met with them on Tuesday. And they're starting a Worship Harvest church in Lilydale. Yeah. So let's just breathe and take that in. In Main Street, Lilydale, right now, they are beginning a Worship Harvest church. So I was hearing the story and also going, well, this is interesting. Kingdom impact, but also going, your friends, and you just interesting, probably. So there might be some questions that you want to talk about with us later. But it was just wonderful to see them and share lunch. At the end of that time, we prayed for each other, and they brought an envelope and they put it in my hands. And they said, we don't have any people right now. It's just us meeting in this place in Main Street, Lilydale. But this is a gift we want to give YVV because we've been tithing our offerings for the last 6 months. And we want to give it to a local partnership of people that are doing kingdom work locally. So YVV, we've been invested in by a church that is starting where we started in Main Street, Lilydale, nearly 30 years on. We're seeing a new church start with people that are carrying the heart for this local area, and they're investing in us. Experiment has started. What else is God going to surprise us with? I did not expect that. And I promised them after I thanked them, as a church, we're about to head into a generosity series. So what they have given us is seed for what God's doing in this next month. And I wonder what else is going to be coming to us. The experiment has launched. Generosity has started. And I don't even know how to explain a lot of those layers of that conversation, except God is generous. And He's investing in us through our friends in Main Street. So as Joe showed you, these are the questions to consider as we launch into the time of what's the next few weeks going to look like for you as God invites you into the experiment. I wonder if you have a quiet trust that Jesus is providing all your needs. I wonder if that's a statement that you agree with for now, that you're feeling that rises in me. I wonder if you're feeling content, and if not, I wonder what that conversation will look like for you. I wonder if point 3, that you do already give away money and possessions freely. And so you're going to hear the Father saying, well done. I wonder also if you're hearing, I want to grow in grace. I wonder if there's something where you're intentionally going to designate part of your God-given resources to kingdom purposes.